There's two boxes on top of each other there. Or you can just put the picture up. I don't know. Yeah. All right. I like it. Are we saying something? Are you mayor?
He gets to be mayor, yeah. Yeah, that's it. I guess I could say Reese. Is there a full screen on this?
Yeah, down bottom. Yep, there you go.
We'll keep it tidy.
So we're not going to get up to the podium and speak. It seems very cumbersome.
Yeah, no, I think
You can walk over here. But the hard part is to be able to identify stuff.
yeah.
I have passed it like pointer so we can start that out. Pass it around.
Jeff, you're
Yeah.
I know, holy cow. These ones are crazy.
Oh, really? So they all came together like.
Yeah, last minute. But
No, no. I unfortunately been in this type of situation, preparing for like city council meetings.
yeah. I actually hate for them talking about like
Oh, really? Yeah.
so this always puts me in an uncomfortable
I mean, I'm better when I practice, but I do it so often.
yeah. After a while, I mean, and I can do it on the fly too. I just forget stuff
Yeah.
that I was just saying.
Well, that's what I do too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I always practice. I just remember that these guys are doing
Hey, Michael. What are you doing? Did you get elected to Superior County for? Was that? Did you get elected to Superior County? It's been a while now. I've been working here for a few years.
Well, good to see you.
Hey, Michael. Yeah.
Speaking to the crowd.
Speaking of,
I need a drink so I can spill out.
that is important.
Yeah. Test it.
Right. So they can record it. Right.
Oh, really? That Bowery one. Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, being safely down the street, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah, Alex, you want to stay there for the next meeting or two?
Oh, that's too bad.
We can make it, I can make a ton of bad decisions as long as it's not.
Put a mask on.
Yeah, we made
Paper mask.
2 tons of that.
Okay.
Back in for next time. So it's cost grief.
What's that?
You're in my seat.
Apple?
Throw my name up there.
No wonder there was gum under it.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of other stuff.
It's on now.
Good to see you, Kevin.
He was here yesterday morning. Is Gavin going to try to make it for the? Was Gavin going to try to make it for this part, or? Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, I think the folks that are coming. Welcome, and thanks for everyone who's participated in the ULI panel for the last couple of days. We'll turn it over to our chair, Laura O'Grady. They're going to present about an hour-long presentation, and then round 2 will be a 30-minute question and answer for everybody.
Thanks. I think I'm just going to stand up here because otherwise you're all going to be looking behind. So thank you for coming. My name is Laura Aldrete. I'm the chair for this ULI TAP. And do I have the clicker? Should I have the clicker?
Just tell me to advance.
You are the
from
clicker.
Yep.
Okay. Right. So we were asked by the town of Superior to come and look at the marketplace. And what ULI is, we're a national organization. We have a very strong local Colorado chapter. We are a nonprofit. We've been around a long time. We really think about responsible land use and real estate development. That's kind of our mission. It is a group of professionals, whether we're urban planners such as myself, transportation engineers, real estate developers, all coming together, urban designers coming together to kind of think about how do we, moving forward in the 21st century, how do we build cities, make cities in a sustainable way that is good for people and is also good for the market. You can read the rest of that. So what is a TAP? It's a technical advisory panel. We do this at a local level as well as at a national level. And it's a grouping of experts from different disciplines, just as I mentioned, from real estate development, urban design, planning, transportation, coming together to look at a issue, a problem that a town or a community has identified. So we come in as volunteers. This is like a little vacation for us to be able to step away from our consulting or our directorship jobs and be able to get a fresh look at a new problem and talk with folks from around the community and really try to, in a very, kind of SWOT sense, dive into a problem, try to come up with some recommendations to help move the ball forward, and then leave it up to the client to go take those next steps. So I'll just run through the team. As I said, my name is Laura Aldrete. I'm with Matrix Design Group. I am an urban planner, urban designer. We have Jordan Block from RNL, who has done a lot of drawing this morning. And Emily Glockner is with the City and County of Denver. She's the Director of Policy,
Planning, and Sustainability.
Thank you. I knew that was.
I'm a transportation engineer.
but does really great with planning, which is why we like her. Greg Moran, who's with Rogue Development, and a developer, and has done a number of developments around the Denver metropolitan area, and so could just provide us with a great sense about how retail really wants to work in different environments, right? Both auto-oriented versus that pedestrian scale. Matt Prosser, who is with EPS, an economist and urban planner, and again, also works, we all work regionally in the Colorado area as well as nationally. And then Jeff Wingert with WWR? Oh. Yeah, okay. Real estate services developer who's more focused for this exercise, more focused on office and thinking about it in the relationship to what's going on in the rest of the corridor. And you guys are welcome to expand a little bit. I'm sure I didn't do you justice, but we all come from many years of working in the field and working on similar problems throughout the area. So how these technical advisory panels work is Eric Swan and Michael Achese in the back do a lot of work to kind of get connected with you all as the client, understand the problem, work with you to set up that problem statement, work with the staff who's done a tremendous amount of work to identify the right stakeholders to interview, set up the tour site for us. They do a tremendous, very in-depth booklet that has all the demographics, all the numbers about how the Marketplace Center is doing, context, right? Helping us understand what the town center is. So Stephen's been tremendous in that. We do the interviews, we do the tour, and then we just kind of huddle for hours and get everybody's different perspective of what they heard and what they saw out on the table and start shifting them through and organizing key thoughts and ideas and then ultimately recommendations. And then so today we'll have some recommendations, some kind of big scale recommendations. And then after that, in a month or two or so, Eric's big task, I'll be done after today, but Eric's task will then be to get a report written in much greater detail that kind of walks it through at a slower pace. And is that anything else to add on the report? And that will be then supplied to the town of Superior. So now moving in, so that's just kind of the big overview. And I always work better when people interrupt me and ask questions. So it's much more of a dialogue, which I think is a healthier, more creative conversation. So feel free to do that. Also, you're less likely to fall asleep because we're going to talk at you for the next 45 minutes before Q&A. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but it's just better, I think you get better results out of these presentations when it's a little more of a dialogue. So just now digging into what we were asked to do specifically, this is the Superior Marketplace that we were asked to come in and look at, and while it's performing economically well, it's about 20 years old, maybe a little bit older, and it's starting to look a little bit tired. There's with the front Flatiron Flyer coming online, there's great recognition that there's some potential, there's these competitive advantages beyond just being a large piece of land that has great visibility to the highway and good access for Costco and Target, that there's some other things here that make us want that maybe we should think differently about what's happening in this center. Next So your staff came up with questions, very specific questions that they wanted us to look at. So really it's looking at the viability of TOD development around this BRT, this bus rapid transit that's down at the south, well, I guess that's northeast corner of the site. What should that mix of uses be? If it is, should we think about something other than just retail and big box and the small boxes that are here as well? The local businesses that are here, how should we think about that? Is one of those mixes housing, and what kind of density should that be? Coming into a town that has traditionally had single-family housing, there's some, multifamily, smaller scale multifamily, a little bit of apartments happening to the south, but primarily you are a single-family residential. So the question is, should we start thinking differently about what the makeup of the housing is here in Superior? What kind of transportation and planning needs to be put in place if we are starting to think differently about the Superior Marketplace Center? And then steps, which will be what would be our recommendations to try to begin moving this ball forward. Next. So this is a vision that you articulated, that the town of Superior articulated, that was kind of a starting point for us together with the questions. That for the Superior Marketplace, you wanted it to begin to think of, right, this evolution, right? If you think about city building, whether it's Rome, which is thousands of years old, or Denver, which is 150, or Town of Superior, which is 100, maybe. Right, it's this evolution. You think about your town, your old town center here. It's this nice grid that has then, but needed some utilities, and so it began to grow into Rock Creek, which had a different type of layout, physical layout. But with that, you got great utilities, great schools. You started to become more of a community, different type, going from a mining town to more of a bedroom community, right? So it's just all this evolution. So then you get your large big box retail center, and now you're starting to think about what's the next evolutionary phase of Town of Superior in general, which you're starting with Town Center is that next phase. But then how does this marketplace tie into that next evolution that you're thinking about in terms of the Town Center? So different types of retail that you're providing here, creating more density, and then how do you think about having a more balanced community in terms of a live-work balance for your, both just for your community, but also from a revenue generation, general fund standpoint. Next slide. So as a planner, I can't help but always start at a much larger context when I'm given a very small, relatively small parcel of 90 acres or so. I always kind of pull back and say, well, where is this sitting, right? So the marketplace is sitting on US 36, which is, for all intents and purposes, an enormous retail center, right? Every community that abuts along US 36 is competing with you and every other community for retail, because retail drives revenue in the state of Colorado, right? Because our property taxes aren't that high. So you're in the game, right? That's the game that you're playing here. And you've got employment dumbbells of Boulder and Denver, where people are moving out to for the day and then coming back to this great experience of being proximal to the outdoors. And so so as we think about this big retail center, we have to keep that in mind. What is everybody else doing along this corridor, and how do you begin to be distinctive and set yourself apart? Because if you just go for the next big type of retail, it's only a matter of time before somebody builds a bigger one, right? And then you're just continually in that race. But if you begin to pull yourselves apart and become distinctive, it's maybe you've got a different game going.
What is the definition of dumbbell?
Well, that's my word. Did you ask that question?
Yeah.
So by dumbbell, I mean is on one end you have Boulder as one end of the dumbbell, and on the other end you've got Denver. And those, in my mind, I think about for the Town of Superior, you are a bedroom community that right now, all those you get up every morning and you either go to Boulder, which is one side of the dumbbell, or you go down to Denver, which is the other side of the dumbbell. And then you've got the bar, right, is this retail corridor that you're competing with. So it's just a way to think about movement of people and movement of money, dollars, and how and quality of life, right? Lifestyle, right? That you're always moving out and in. Yeah, is that helpful? Okay. So I'm not going to go through that, but you can read that there's lots of. So, and then to go through strengths, the kind of our SWOT analysis. Jordan will.
So I'll climb up there too, so I don't loom behind you. So I know, so I'm Jordan Block. I'm an urban designer and planner with R&L in Denver. And I know Laura just presented, that's okay, I think I'm okay. Laura just presented some of the questions we were asked by the city and what we were trying to look at. So one of the things I wanted to know was sort of what's strong about this marketplace area in terms of a regional, destination. What's strong about it structurally and design-wise, and what's weak. So I can run through a little bit of what we see as sort of your strengths and weaknesses and opportunities. So the strengths are that the town center, and you have strong connectivity. So you have this town center project that's coming online down the road, and that's going to really, I think, change. It's that next evolution, as Laura pointed out, and that's really going to start changing things around here. And you have a strong connection to that. You have a strong connection to the existing community. You have a strong connection to a BRT station and the Highway 36 corridor. You're easily accessible, and it's a great location. You have this excellent freeway location, which again is connectivity, but it's also visibility, and the marketplace sits right there. When you pass along, when all these people on that dumbbell pass through, they see the marketplace area every day, whether they notice it or not. A lot of people will notice Costco and some of the other uses, but down the road you have this opportunity for real visibility for whatever you end up kind of implementing there. You have these anchor tenants, which are huge and irreplaceable. You have Costco, you have Super Target, you have Whole Foods, and that's such an amazing place to start for any development, any change, and really just a real boon to your community. You have the BRT, which right now sort of dumps you out into a parking lot to a degree, and it doesn't really have that sense of place yet, but it's a major connector to the region, to both Denver and Boulder, and a really strong asset. And then this growing bikeway system. I know that right now the bikeway system sort of crosses 36 and dodges and weaves outside a Superior degree, but projects down the line are bringing that connection straight in front of the marketplace, and that's another great connection for that multimodal connectivity. The weaknesses. These are, I think, a little more obvious maybe. You have this unbalanced mix of uses. You have sort of the traditional old-style way of zoning. You have your regional power center in the marketplace. You have your residential, and they are completely different parts of the community. So there's unbalance. There's not a mix. There's not this dynamic kind of combining of uses. I think anyone that's been in the marketplace development will understand that it's an auto-oriented layout, meaning it's very geared towards driving and not geared towards everything else. So a lot of parking, a lot of streets that aren't necessarily that walkable or bikeable. Again, abundance of service parking. You have this physical separation that I mentioned from greater Superior community. So, the marketplace is great, but no one's walking there. It's sort of a separate use completely. You have sort of a greenway belt that almost is a great connector, but in some ways also divides. And then you have this sort of single dependence on, or maybe not single, but large dependence on the revenue that's generated from the marketplace development. So some of the things that were weaknesses are also opportunities. The first opportunity is you have this RTD pad site. Again, the BRT, the bus rapid transit, dumps you out into a parking lot, and that's an RTD parking lot, which is actually potentially a good thing. The bad thing about parking is that it's not people-oriented and it doesn't present a sense of place. The good news about parking is that it's also undeveloped land. It's flat, undeveloped land, so there's a lot of potential for change in that. So outside the RTD pad site, you also have, kind of shown in blue, some undeveloped and available parcels for redevelopment. They're owned in part, again, by RTD and in part by Centro, the owner of the larger marketplace development, and then 47 acres of parking. It's a huge amount of development site or development area just in parking alone. So again, that's sort of a weakness in that it doesn't give you that sense of place, but a strength in that it's a really strong place to start for development because you have sort of a blank sheet. And I think with that, we're going to turn over back to Laura.
So I think for us, thinking about this problem statement that you gave us about how do we rethink this marketplace is, what we know about the population of the millennials, which is going to drive our markets for the next 20 years, 20, 30 years, is that they want to be in a place that's cool to be in. So I thought this was an appropriate, James Kunstler is an author of Geography of Nowhere, if you haven't read his books. But right, so if you think about post-World War and where we just went on this rampage to build as many highways as wide as possible, that was about the 20th century, right? So it's just like getting to someplace, but once you got there, there was no there. And I think where we are today is that we want to make the place that's something that is worth staying in, so that you can linger, so that you can hang out from multi-generations, can be in that same space, and you can live there, you can work there, you can play there. Usually you can drink there, have beers. So I think that's kind of the mindset. And so we wanted to start out, we'll kind of break this down into different specific types of uses, but the overarching piece here is placemaking. How do you make place in a place where there's no there? And I think there's great elements, and we want to start with those elements and build from that. So I'm just going to talk about, if you just go to the next slide, some principles that I think are very applicable to applying to a way of thinking, of rethinking about this marketplace. And I will say all of this that you'll hear from here on out is really in respect to the first and foremost that you need to hold on to those revenue generators, right? Let's make sure that we keep those healthy and we keep them vibrant and we keep access and visibility to those, because your community is dependent on those. And let's do what we can to support that. But we think there's enough land here that we can do both and. And I think that's kind of to Jordan's point, whereas before everything's been thought about in separate ways. And now we think we can use some of this land to kind of begin integrating this idea of retail and a place. So TOD principles. So TOD is transit-oriented development. So it's thinking about capitalizing on a transit station, in this case your BRT, and you want to, these are kind of some basic overall pieces, but creating greater density than the community average. And so I don't mean to say you should become Denver. I mean to say you should become, the suggestion is that you become more dense than you are today. And it's always going to be scaled, right? You cannot go from single story to 8 stories. It's an evolutionary process. And I think to try to, I think you might all agree also that you don't want 8 stories, but you might want, you're not quite there yet, maybe another 50 years, but you should become more dense than you are today. That being said, in order to create viable retail, you're gonna need a certain amount of density, which means you're gonna need a certain amount of height. Quality pedestrian environments, we touched on that as one of the weaknesses. It's not an easy place to either be in as a pedestrian or to get to as a pedestrian. So that's materiality, that's ease of wayfinding, that you should create a unique node, right? That it should be something that is distinct from town center, but also complementary to town center. You don't want to compete with it, and I think there's lots of ways that you can do that in a complementary way. A mix of uses and prices, so a range of housing types, and a range of uses, right? Office, retail, housing. And that this has to become a community vision in order, and we'll talk about that public engagement, but we heard very clearly that there is a lot of dialogue that has happened about the changes in this community, and which is representative of the state, right? We are growing, our state is growing, and it's not going to grow. And so how do we deal with that? How do we plan for that and not react with it? And the way to be successful in that, as you all know, is community, that this has to become part of the community's vision, right? Not just consultant's vision or a few select, but it really has to be a community vision. So just some quick, are there pictures of this? No. Okay. So just some quick placemaking elements, right? So, and you'll see this in the plan and the quick vision that we drew out this morning. You've got to organize and orient it from the transit station. You want it to be compact and, again, mixed use. This idea of high quality pedestrian environment. Some kind of a street grid where you can move, whether you are in a circulator, on foot, on bike, or in a car, that there are multiple ways to move through. And And that is a move kind of back to an urban grid, which is actually back to your town. Your old town has a beautiful grid. And so we're kind of going back to that old town grid and bringing that back into your marketplace, as opposed to kind of cul-de-sacs and one ways ins and one ways outs that where a lot of congestion can happen. And then you start that by thinking about an urban infrastructure framework, and those are kind of the early implementation pieces that you put in place, and again, a range of housing. Oh, it did connect. It's a little surprise. I was like, I thought. So this is just a graphic example of perhaps what you have today, right, versus an organization of transit-oriented development where you've got your station here, you've got some commercial around that, or whether it's commercial or housing, some public open space, and then you've got lots of connectivity in and out of the site, and then your parking is back on the back sides, right? So you're celebrating places where people want to be, whether it's office, retail, or public spaces, and then you're putting the cars in their appropriate places. You're storing them appropriately. Next slide.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about access and connectivity for all the different modes, which includes vehicular, bus, ped, and bike. And we recognize that people are going to continue to drive their car to Costco and Super Target. The majority of people really need to keep getting to those places. So we want to maintain Marshall Road as we can to be a major access for those large generators. But then we want to look at bus circulation and the potential for a circulator between the town center and the marketplace. The circulators really work best when they're fast and frequent. People will not rely on them if they're not frequent, so you don't want to stretch shuttles out too far. So starting with the town center and marketplace, as marketplace starts to develop, is a really thoughtful way to introduce a circulator type system. And then from a ped bike perspective, we want those larger streets to accommodate pedestrian and bicycles, but not necessarily prioritize them. We want to prioritize our pedestrian and bicycle traffic on some of those neighborhood streets. And then as we start to get into an urbanized area, such as your TOD, you really want to create comfortable spaces for pedestrians and cyclists. So if you go to the next slide, Eric, you really want to protect those bicycle facilities that are on street. You can protect them with planter boxes or on-street parking. We put in a protected bike lane on 15th Street through downtown Denver, and there was an increase in cyclists. It increased like 65% on that corridor or something. So really what you're doing is you're getting to those interested but concerned group, those people that want to ride their bike to the place, but they just aren't comfortable on the street, So this type of treatment will help with that comfortable environment. And then the next slide shows those pedestrian spaces. So as you urbanize an area, you do want to make sure that you're thoughtful about creating comfortable, wide pedestrian spaces. And then celebrating where people want to cross the street, making sure that there's mid-block crossings where people really want to cross. You can do that with rapid flashing beacons, and that's where you go up and you push the button, the light starts to flash for the cars, and the cars really do respect that, and people do stop for pedestrians crossing the streets. So thinking about pedestrians from that perspective. So then moving on, we also talked about mobility hubs. This came up during the stakeholder interview with RTE, and it's actually a really great way to take the bus rapid transit station and create a mobility hub. This is a nice graphic from the San Diego area of governments that highlights how you can create a mobility hub right at a transit station. And that includes bike share stations. That includes areas for car share that are specific to car share. Drop-off areas for potentially Uber and shift or that kind of concept. So the orange mode is kind of the half-mile mode, and then as you get to the peak mode, those can go out to 3 and 4 miles away from the station. We do want to be thoughtful about how we would introduce bike share to a transit station. Bike share programs really work best when they are networks and not nodes. So if you have a bike share station, you'd want to put a couple of bike share stations over in the town center. You'd also probably want to scatter them throughout the marketplace so that they're all working together. You know, you could put one over by a park or something like that. So, you know, you want to introduce really probably 7 or 8 bike share stations moving forward.
So we talked about placemaking, and we talked about sort of the connectivity, and now we're going to run through the different uses that we see potential for in the marketplace. And so I'm going to start with housing, and then Greg and Jeff will talk about retail and office. So what's going on in housing currently, current conditions? So the housing market is very strong in Denver, as I think probably most people are aware. If you look at the home price index for the metro area, we're in the top 5 of all cities or metro areas continually over the last couple of years. And that's really been driven by 3 things in my mind. It's the quality of life of living in Colorado, but also the acceleration of employment within the Denver metro area. I think the ratio of new jobs to new housing units built in the last 6 years in the metro area is about 3 to 1. And so we're actually growing faster in employment than we are in housing production. And that creates a lot of demand for housing, but it also creates affordability issues as some communities are dealing with. And also Superior is next to Boulder, and Boulder has such even a greater imbalance of job creation to housing growth. And so the affordability issues really drive the market for housing in Superior as well. What we're also finding is the market, developers, building owners, they put a premium on access to employment centers, to transit, and to vibrant places. So when we look at successful housing developments throughout the metro area, those elements are things that are driving higher rents, higher demand for new units. And so that's specifically true in Boulder and Broomfield. The Boulder-Broomfield submarket for apartments specifically, but also likely for for-sale housing, is higher than the metro average. There's been over 6,500 apartment units added to this submarket in the past 6 years, so robust growth in apartment development. And Boulder specifically having significant demand for housing and not able to meet that. The Boulder University submarket, which is a submarket within the state of Boulder, their vacancy for apartments right now is 1.7%. That's basically means just turnover. So if somebody, as soon as somebody moves out, they just happen to get caught in the survey, and that's getting immediately filled. So there's strong demand. Which is an opportunity to introduce that use into the marketplace as perhaps one of the first uses, because it's likely the more feasible and market-ready use to go in now. So moving on. We looked at, I wanted to show a couple examples of the type and scale of housing that we thought made sense in the BRT station, but also in the next slide, I'll give you examples if you want to go back, but I'll give examples of housing that's gone next to shopping centers. So these are a couple examples of transit-oriented developments in the metro area. And so the key things they consider there are orientation to the station, being pedestrian-friendly, and then making sure they have amenities such as a green space or other things that support living next to a transit amenity. And so this is Arista, this is down 36, so this is a pretty close example. Top right being Lincoln Station down on the southeast corridor, and then this is the Denison project, which was a public-private partnership between RTD, the City of Denver, and a developer to convert a parking lot that RTD had at this Alameda station into a housing development. So the exact type of thing that could occur here at the Superior BRT. And then we're also seeing, and it's kind of interesting, more and more shopping centers are introducing housing right next to them and being able to enter or coexist, as I like to say, in ways that you wouldn't think
could be possible, but are actually attractive to people. And so a couple of examples here. In Arvada, waiting for the Gold Line to open, there's a transit station to the north of this Arvada Marketplace development that has a super target, very similar to the Superior Marketplace. And between the transit station and the large power center there, they've added some apartments and sort of that gridded network that serve as a buffer between the transit station, but it becomes more of an integrated mixed-use place, but not necessarily mixed use in terms of buildings, just mixes next to each other. And then this is an example in Stapleton where we actually have pretty high-end row homes that back right up into a parking lot for these retail strips here. And actually, most of these are restaurant and bars where, you know, people like being next to a green space, but also next to vibrant retail that they can walk to easily. So thinking of, next slide, future opportunities, what do we see? Well, I think in the near term, multifamily residential at the station is definitely a possibility. It's an activating use that we could look at putting into the marketplace today. And the scale, as I mentioned, matching with sort of those pictures that we provided earlier, is that 3 to 5 story apartment building. Introducing structured parking. Now that makes feasibility of development a little bit harder and something that might have a feasibility gap, but is needed in this type of denser environment. And then later on, the idea of adding attached single family row homes, townhomes, in as a complementary housing use is also a possibility. That's later phase though. You sort of have to create the place before the market's really going to respond with that product type. And making sure to orient that type of housing towards your big amenities. So, I mean, there's opportunities to try to orient this type of housing towards Founders Park. And so when we think of market segments that could be attracted, I mean, there's a real captive audience for recent graduates of CU students. You have a lot of retail service workers in the area that probably don't have housing close because a lot of the housing around here is primarily single family. And then I like to say the priced out Boulder millennial. I mean, I think that's a lot of people that want to live in Boulder, but they just can't afford it, and they're working there. And so that could be a strong market segment to go after. And then lastly, affordable housing. Affordable housing is a huge need in Boulder County, one of the priciest markets in the nation. And these type of developments, affordable housing developments, they like to be next to employment. They like to be next to transit because it provides the people that live there, you know, lower transportation costs. And so it might be a component that could be introduced here. And I mean, that could mean a lot of different things. Affordable housing has a stigma to some, but in reality, in a lot of applications throughout the metro area and the country, the building that these units go into look no different than a market rate development. They actually are the same. The difference really is just the financing tool that's used to make them happen, and then the fact that the residents may have to qualify under certain income limits. And in reality, the grants and financing tools that are available for housing may make it easier for affordable housing development to get done in this type of environment because there's more resources to bring to the project from the developer's perspective. So with that, we'll turn it over to Greg.
Okay. Again, I'm Greg Moran, developer with Rogue. I've had a lot of experience with this type of project, and as I explained to these guys and we were going through this, it kind of brings back good or bad memories of the late 90s, early 2000s when we were blowing and going with millions of square feet around the market. And this project, while I consider it still to be a very successful project, is just from a different period of time. And and as Laura hit it, we're trying to get people to stay in the projects versus trying to just get them to the projects to shop. I think the big thing to look at this is kind of, as Laura was saying, we need to think about a big scale and then kind of bring it down to the project itself. You know, during that 6 years of 2006 to 2012, 3.5 million square feet was added between Broomfield and South Boulder. So there was a ton of square footage added in this area. Now that being said, today there's still only a 6.6% vacancy according to Cushman at the end of Q2. So it's not a big number. And that comprises, you know, of an inventory of over 26 million square feet of shopping centers with 1,600 plus projects. And then you look at, there was only about 152,000 feet in that corridor being built. So it's not like you've got a ton coming on. And then when you start looking at this project that's predominantly full, even though it has from a distinct period that's very different from what we would build today, it's still only a 7% vacancy. So you're just about 0.4% above the market average. And if you fill the vacancy, which is the large box of Sports Authority, you're at a 2% vacancy. In my world of being an owner of a property or looking at long-term viability, that's a win. That's a huge win. So the first thing I think that everybody needs to get their arms around is this is not a broken project. It's just something that needs a little glimmer on it to make it a little bit better. The big thing that we did here, though, was the project and the tenants are still recovering from the divergent diamond. That was a big, big deal, and that really hurt the tenants. So thinking about that long term, and I'm sure if it happened over here, it happened over there. So the entire corridor probably felt that, and you saw that in your sales tax revenue. Go ahead. As we looked at the project, everybody that's still above 15,000 square feet as an anchor is doing great. They're still doing good. The volumes are coming back up. Costco's good. Sales are good at Target. Your sales have increased over the last 10%, 12.79%. And that's even including the downturn of 15, when everything was kind of going backwards. You got great vehicular traffic, as we mentioned already. You got the great freeway visibility. It's a regional location, and it's the only viable retail project of this magnitude, which is the one-stop shop opportunity in the community. It just needs to have a little more brought into the project. Let's go to the next one. As we looked at it as part of the downside of what does this project need? How do we start addressing some of the concerns? First thing is was when, because of the scale of the project and because of what was built back in 1999, it's multiple projects is really what it is. You have major corridors and roads going through it, and you might as well have 4 different projects in this thing the way it's set up today. So you've got this compartmentalized retail that needs to be integrated with multiple uses throughout it. As we looked at the visibility, this is a big, big factor, and this is what happens when you don't pay attention necessarily, and I'm going to pick on Brixmor a little bit, I'm going to pick on Elman a little bit, I'm going to pick on the city a little bit here. Landscaping is good. I like landscaping, but at some point it becomes a hindrance. And when people don't pay attention to it, you end up with 28-foot evergreens that you can't see through. So this is one of the things we talked about, is it needs to be a visible corridor. It needs to have some visible areas where you can deal with the overgrown landscaping. And then signage. I've done projects this size, and one of the big things that we always paid attention to, and I'm not saying that they didn't pay attention to it, but it's wayfinding. It's trying to make it as simple to get from point A to point B while you're driving in a vehicle. The only difference here is you happen to be going 45 miles an hour down Marshall, and you're trying to figure out when to get off and where to get off and how to find the small tenant. So that's a big deal, and so I think that the signage is a big deal. As we go looking at the thing forward, adequate pedestrian traffic, we've addressed that. I'm not going to beat that dead horse, but it's not a walkable project as it sits today. Obviously, no one's going to be walking from, assume the coffee shop near one port of it to Costco, because you're not going to be carrying back 600 pounds of food. But the point is, you want to make it walkable such that the services that you provide in the future are going to benefit the BRT. They're going to benefit the residents that hopefully live in the housing that's on this property. They're going to benefit the office workers that are here day in and day out. And then I think the biggest thing I heard from people was Marshall is almost too active to be considered a retail corridor. It's really difficult when you take a major road like that and put it right through the middle of a retail project with that dragging people through you, which is great, but not everybody's getting off. And so it becomes kind of a highway in the middle of your shopping center. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so where do you go from here? I mean, these are the tiny steps, big steps. It's kind of my vision of how you deal with this. First off, we need to embrace the investment of the town center. And how do we capitalize upon that? And as we've already talked about, the integration that has to occur within the commercial corridor, which is this north end of Superior. So you start thinking about this as one area. When you do that, you start thinking about how do we brand Superior that maybe not just a bedroom community. It's not just a spot on I-36 between the dumbbells. You say, okay, what are we going to do here? Well, you've already got this going across the street. You are in an enviable position from my perspective. I live in the city of Denver, and I got to put my bike on the roof of my car to get anywhere cool to ride my mountain bike. So you guys walk out your front door, get on your bike, and you ride. So you need to embrace that. This is a family-friendly, community-oriented sports area. People are outside, they're doing things. I think there's almost a point where you say this is the most comprehensive sportsplex in northern Colorado. With what they're presenting across the street, the hotels that are coming, a place to be seen as people are saying, wow, Superior, that's a cool place. Boulder's done that, but Boulder isn't what it used to be because people can't afford to be in Boulder. So it's got to be, how do you do this and commit to the community for this? You generate sports-oriented health, fitness, experiential retailers. That's the new thing in retail. People want to know that they've gone someplace and they've been engaged in that, whether it's eating, whether it's shopping, whether it's being part of an environment. And I list all the things that can come across that's not presently represented here. Rock climbing, The rec center, which I've heard some people want. Tennis and golf simulators are inside, batting cages, bowling, yoga, massage, meditation. I mean, some of this is just kind of dysfunctional in the area, but why wouldn't you take some of this and kind of try and create a town center where more of this is available, where you can go one place and you can do your extension of your one-stop shopping and experience. You got to focus on key restaurants here. That's the biggest thing here, and I think that is where Marshall has almost hurt you more than helped you, because it divides the community. As you go through there, it's hard to find a good spot, great patios. Unfortunately, there's places that there should have been patios facing right that way, and they're not. And that's kind of one of the things you got to think about. And you got to think about how we do that and create a town center that has a format that helps the BRT, helps the residents, helps the office tenants, and co-work spaces, which I think is another big thing, because it sounds like there's a lot of home-based businesses up here. Let's go to the next one. Now we're on to office.
I'm going to talk about office. When we look at TODs, it's kind of like a three-legged stool. So we just talked about the residential, which obviously is a key piece. We talked about the retail, which is another key piece of that. But sometimes the forgotten leg is the commercial piece and the office piece. And it's really important so that we have balance, so that we have all three legs in balance, so that we're not teetering around a little bit here. So why do we really want that office to be such a key component of this? It really gives us that 18-hour activation during the day. We've got people that live here, so morning to night, we've got the residents here. We've got our retail during the day that's going to be used. But the restaurants that Greg was talking about, that are so critical here, they're going to be much more successful if they can be activated during the middle of the day as well as the evening when a lot of the residents are here. It also gives us a good opportunity for a live-work situation. Yeah, we're on BRT, and that's what we were talking about. So people have the opportunity to come in, and right now, they have the opportunity to leave and go to whether it's Denver or Boulder. But if we put offices here, it gives us a different opportunity to catch some of those people and create opportunities for offices to be created. Different opportunities, such as, we talked about this later too, WeWorks, that so many home offices that exist in Superior today can maybe take advantage of some of those opportunities that could go into more of a commercial setting. So when we look at where we are right now as far as commercial or office space, and I'm focusing on non-medical office when I'm talking about the numbers up here, there's about a little less than 250,000 total square feet of office in Superior right now, primarily in 3 different locations. And then projected, there's about 350,000 square feet of office that will go into the new town center development. So significant numbers, yes, but when we look at the existing stock of what you have right now, not real significant when we look at the rest of the community in the region that we're working. So Boulder, that's the key office originator, generator in the region, has about 2.5 million square feet of office inventory. Class A is downtown, then you get into more of Class B, C, the flex that is more on the east end of Boulder. Boulder's big issues right now are, that's an old stock. There's some new stuff that's gone in, but not enough to accommodate and take care of the needs. Particularly when you look at the downtown stock, Class A, there's not enough to accommodate. So you get tenants that, as they grow, Boulder's a very, very entrepreneurial community. A lot of companies start there, they grow there, and they can't stay there because they grow to a point that they need enough office. So they start downtown in those incubators, they move to that east space, be able to expand into that, just not big enough footprints or floor plates to accommodate those, and ultimately when they expand, they start moving out of Boulder. A lot of them are going down the 36 corridor. A lot of them go to Interlochen. A lot of them go down to Denver. So those are lost opportunities that are driving right by Superior when we look at some of the potential opportunities for office in this area. Boulder also, not only does it have an aging stock, but there's limitations in Boulder that are critical to office use. Parking, for example, is a big need in Boulder. It's so restricted that it creates other challenges for office users as they grow. When we look at Interlochen, so this is kind of, I'll look at talk about the office dumbbell. We talked about Denver and Boulder, but this would be the one really between Boulder and Interlochen. Those are the 2 areas that really house the preponderance of the office users. There's about almost 3.5 million square feet of office space, really office, Class A and Class B office space in that region, primarily Class A office. significant amount of parking there, so they don't have any issues being able to accommodate, and that's a good attractor for a lot of the tenants that are looking to be able to take care of those needs. What they don't have is good access to amenities. They're a little bit of an island out there, so people still either have to get in their cars or get on a bike or do something to get to those amenities. State-of-the-art infrastructure is there. It's not the aging infrastructure that I'm talking about with Boulder. And it's good pricing competition when you look at the type buildings with the building, and look at pricing compared to what really what Boulder has. So another reason that companies can be drawn down the corridor when they run out of space for opportunities in the central core of Boulder. Louisville, really not too much of a competitor in the office area that we're talking about. They've got a lot more call it kind of flex manufacturing office space, and they've done a good job with that. We look at the Centennial Valley, we've got 1 million or so square feet of that type of office space there. But that's not really servicing that need that I think we're focusing on, and that becomes a big part of the Superior marketplace. Next slide. So when we look at the Superior marketplace specifically, some of the strengths are visibility to US 36. When we get some of these young startup growth companies, what happens to those companies? A lot of times they grow to a point, then they get bought out. Some great examples of that: Google has bought companies in Boulder, Twitter has bought companies in Boulder. Those companies like to have their names out in front of the world. What better place than right along Highway 36 and taking advantage of the 60,000 in commuters that are going to Boulder every day that are driving along there. We have flexibility to meet user needs. We have a clean slate here, so we don't need to worry about what this floor plate looks like. We can flex, we can grow, we can do different things. When we talk about the type spaces that these people need. There's little to no Class A office between Boulder and Interlochen. That's that dumbbell effect we talked about. And with the amenities that are planned, not only in Superior Marketplace that we're looking at, but also in the town center, we'll have access to those. And those are so important to the people that will be using those offices, the millennials we talked about before. And the access, I think the key piece is access to that bus transit. We have a stop right there that gets people in and out as necessary. It creates those opportunities and also creates the opportunities for people in Superior. Some of our weaknesses, if we want to look at those, it's not a Boulder, it's not an Interlochen address. That is an important component that some of these companies look at. I think some of that is because we don't have a lot of office space in this area anyway. So we're only 250,000 square feet. There's not a lot of opportunities. We don't have that scale that allows it to become a more recognizable area that some of those companies would want to land. How deep is the demand for office space here? Again, same thing. We don't have enough here to really understand that. So I think that can grow, and what the town center is looking at, there's some good opportunities to start creating some of that scale. We talked about the opportunities to some degree, but we can really here in Superior accommodate what Boulder can. We can get those bigger footprints, we can get those bigger areas. We can also create a different opportunity that Interlochen can't. We're right on the BRT, so we can build a place that people have great access to and great opportunities. The amenities that we have here are far better than what they can get in Interlochen, just immediate access when we make a very walkable community that we're talking about with this TOD. New office, it's a golden opportunity. We can put in all the infrastructure that all of these companies need. They're looking to take care of their kind of 24/7 millennial employees. And it gives us these opportunities for the co-working that we mentioned before, for whether it's people coming in from the region or really a lot of those in-home businesses that exist in Superior today. So our threats, when we look at, oops, we missed the 3 and the 6. There's not significant, Superior's not a significant office player in the 36 corridor right now, so you have to overcome that. And again, I think some of that comes with scale. Boulder, Interlochen are the two places that work, similar concepts, similar ideas. Rising construction costs are a big issue right now. When we look at the rates and if we need to be competitive in the market, cost for construction going up at such a significant rate that we need to be cognizant of those things and looking at the challenges that we face there. And the amount of office space, when I talked about that as an opportunity to create a better recognition and some scale here, but I think the amount of office space that's planned at the tech center could be a threat to the long-term plans for office that we built this PRT.
All right. Hey, everyone, it's me again. So I'm going to bring you through, try to tie some of these ideas of the retail, the office, and housing and other sort of land use together, and what this vision could start looking like, one of the ways it could start looking like. Transit-oriented development, as with any sort of good place that you like spending time, is really all about making it a really strong, comfortable place to be, a place to gather, a place to spend time with your neighbors and friends and people watch. And there's a scale of what that means. We call it placemaking. Placemaking can mean a number of things. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in placemaking. That's some of the things we talked about: signage and nicer walking environments, comfortable sidewalks, street furniture. And then it goes all the way up from there to what kind of development, the quality of the architecture, the quality of the parks, the quality of the sort of overall environment that you end up building. And we'll show you a little bit of a vision of what we think that can start looking like in a second. But to get really a good sense of place, you need the number one ingredient, as a lot of you might guess if asked, is people. And the way you get people is have those people that are already coming to the retail, but also build places for those people to live. Get people to that place, staying in that place. There'll be that constant environment of people in the community and the area. You have great residential areas, but again, they're separate from this marketplace area, and they don't linger necessarily after they're done shopping. They get in their car and they drive home. And then you create really good environments for those people to spend time. So a few of those things I kind of pointed out already: great streetscape. When you walk down your favorite streets in your favorite neighborhoods, think about what those places look like. They're comfortable. They're tree shaded. There's places for you to sit. There's places for you to relax. There's strong active edges. There's places for you to shop. There's a great feeling of walking past some really nice architecture with ground floor retail, as opposed to walking past a parking garage with a brick wall that has no activation at all. So kind of think about the differences between some of those things. And then to make this work, you need visibility for the retail, and this is two different things. This is visibility for the existing retail, these strong anchors you already have, keeping those alive and keeping those as part of this growing environment that you're going to create here. And also for the retail that ends up coming into the town center and into our sort of vision in this expanding transit-oriented development location. In placemaking, I think I kind of went over this, but it's about public spaces. So there's a few pictures on the your right, my left, of sort of environments you want to get. Architecture is great, buildings are great, density brings people, but really it's all about that sense of place. It's about places to gather and places to spend time. And I don't know if anyone's been down to the Union Station Pop Jet, the plaza's right in front of Union Station, but that's all it was. It's water squirting out of the ground, and it's like the most active place in all of Denver. It's incredible in my opinion. And it's really kind of thinking through high quality, intentional spaces where people want to spend time. And that will both be places, they're sort of the secondary or maybe primary and only backyard for the residents if they live in apartment buildings, as places when people come as visitors, they shop in the stores, they eat in the restaurants, then they stay a little bit longer. So I want to bring you through kind of our drawing, our vision. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to kind of bring you through a three-step sort of process of how to get a new sort of transit-oriented development, a higher density, a higher concentration of people and residences, retail, and other uses. But first, I think that this might be a little opaque for some people, just looking at literally a photograph of a map. So I'll orient you a little bit. Highway 36 is obviously the big white stripe. The McCaslin diverging diamond interchange is this thing here. The bus rapid transit currently pulls you in to a platform sort of right along here. This is Marshall Road. That kind of swoops through the middle of the site. You have your Super Target, you have your I messed that up already today. You have your Super Target, you have your Costco, Whole Foods over here. So that's just trying to give you a little bit of an orientation to what we're going to be looking at, because the next few pictures sort of show the same things. So, go back. To create change, the first thing you have to do is free up land to create the change. And again, the
the idea of orienting to and celebrating the transit in the transit-oriented development is really crucial. So the land that you have available to do that is currently owned by RTD. And to make that land developable, you have to make RTD happy, basically. You have to help them with their parking. You know, if you put a building on top of a parking lot, obviously that parking is gone. So the first step could be something along the lines of a land swap. Right now, I'll try to outline, this is RTD land right here. But maybe there's some opportunity for a land swap, get rid of some of this land that's RTD, swap with this vacant parcel right along the bridge here, and build a structure that houses the, I think, 294 parking spaces that currently exist. So replace it sort of one-to-one and free up that land for development in the future. That's not necessarily phase one. I think a lot of the phase one stuff is place-making stuff, signage, and sort of that lighter stuff. But once you start committing to build, this is the place to start. Go to the next slide. So phase, I said first phase, but really, you know, this is sort of the next evolution. Once you get the parking in there, you start freeing up land. You want to build sort of place and people automatically. You want to put in that residential component. That's the place to start. And that's really the heart of TOD. It's definitely not the only place that TOD needs to go, but the heart of TOD is people living there. So just to give you an idea of what you're looking at here, this is your parking garage that you'd be building for RTD to replace their parking, and then the creation of some new street network in here, sort of the beginning of this Main Street idea of 2 apartment buildings maybe, to start bringing a few hundred units into the community. And as Matt pointed out, that could look probably like 3 to 5 stories, multifamily buildings, apartment buildings with good street edges, good first floor retail or other active edges. And that starts kind of creating that sense of place, and it also includes, you have to really put a commitment towards really strong streets and really strong walking environments. And then before we go to the next slide, I think the word Greg used was add a little glimmer. This next step is going to be, I think, a lot of glimmer. So this is going to, what we're going to show you is
and before you get to see the next slide, please understand that no animals were hurt when filming in this movie, but the retailers you're going to see, and please don't take this to the literal. I mean, we started playing this and saying, okay, if you're going to give me an architectural license to play with this, what would we do if you could do it all? Okay, so that's what you're going to see, and so all the tenants that are here, we can figure out how to replace them. I mean, again, it's only money. But it is a component of taking what's there today, keeping what works, what's successful, and how the small tenants work, along with bringing in new tenants. And it's this idea that what I think is there today doesn't function as well as it could. And this is kind of where we want to take the next step. So please understand, we're not trying to kick tenants out of the project.
Okay, enough asterisks, enough enough covering for ourselves. Let's go to the next slide. So this is something. So this is sort of the big moves. This is the aspiration. This is a version of the vision that was going to take a lot of partnerships, a lot of time, and a lot of effort to build out. And it's going to be a city project. It's going to be a developer-led project, and it's going to be all about collaborating to make something big happen. I'm going to walk you through a few pieces of it just to kind of orient you to what we're looking at and how we think about this. So the biggest thing to point out in this, and I'll kind of stand out of the light, is that currently Marshall Road in its current configuration runs through here. We think the existing Marshall Road is a very pedestrian unfriendly street in its sort of current construction. It's 150 feet wide, and it's hard to cross. We all walked across it yesterday, and it's a hefty street, and then, you don't even get to the center median before the red hand starts blinking. So it's unfriendly, it's too large, and it kind of cuts off the ability to get that critical mass of development in that TOD area. So our big move, and this is a big move, is the idea of reconstructing Marshall further to the west, further closer to Costco and Target and some of these other uses, and bringing it out and really expanding that transit-oriented development zone and creating these larger pockets of development in here. This sort of big move has several purposes aside from just creating more land to develop for this sort of community aspect. It also brings Marshall Road closer to your big tenants. It brings it closer to Target and Costco, and we talked to a few of them yesterday, and this is a great thing for Costco's per se, and that brings visibility right up to their front door. Again, we started with these kind of 2 apartment building idea here, celebrating the transit stop leading to it. Now the idea is to expand that, start building that out a little bit, and creating that spine that becomes the heart of this thing and the center of it. We kind of gridded this out, created sort of a figurative expansion of the grid that was original town, although obviously tilted to celebrate the BRT a little bit and opened up this end for the views to the mountains. We think that there's great opportunity, as was kind of pointed out, for office environment. And the best place to do that is right along your highway where it has the biggest visibility and people can see your branding, people can see your architecture, and people can see what's going on there. So sort of create some opportunities for office right up along that corridor. And the rest really, a lot of residential probably is what's happening, but the key thing is whichever way you construct this, it has to be flexible to the market. So even though we think that this sort of one singular use of residential in the first phase and office sort of up by the highway, as it kind of grows and fills out, you're going to be responding to market forces. So you might end up with more office because that really exploded and took off, or you might end up with more residential because that's really working really well and it's complementing the existing residential units, and it's creating the dorm rooms for Boulder. And this whole plan is all about connectivity, right? It's about making more connections, and that's what good placemaking is about, is making it so you don't have to be funneled along any one corridor to get anywhere. It's about having choices and being able to travel through something. So you plant the seed with a great structure of sort of this strong main street, make sure you activate those edges. You also have this idea of sort of a green street that cuts through here. The idea of that is you currently have these large detention ponds. There's some ability to kind of trap water in the street and make these really kind of lush, water responsive sort of streets, and that would do a great job of capturing that and give it a lot of brand and really feel cool, I think. And then start connecting to the outside world a little bit. Bring it through wherever you possibly can. Kick through here, connect in, connect. One thing we want to point out that's sort of down here is right now you have this really great amenity that's Founders Park that you guys built out. It's a beautiful park, and as far as I could tell, there is not a single house that actually faces it. So we all kind of latched onto this. I know it's sort of a little distant, a little satellite from what we're showing you, but these existing elements you have, like Founders Park, you want people fronting them, you want activation to them, you want ownership over this sort of park. So there's some opportunity for, once you start building this out, maybe some of these retail tenants might be able to move into this core, and you might be able to redevelop some residential sort of owning that park and creating activation and energy there. And then, some other opportunities to add some pad sites and other sort of retail uses and some sort of retail visibilities up there. The key things we want to point out is the structure, but also that at the end of the day, you have your major anchors, Whole Foods, Target, Costco, and they're all happy. They got greater visibility, their parking wasn't taken away, and then you still have the ability to create this really amazing TOD village in the middle. And I think that, this is a strong concept. But if you go to the next slide, this is one of probably a million concepts that you can go about. We tried a few different ones. We ended up going with kind of this drawing on the right and building from that. But when you would decide to go through this, you're going to be hiring a consultant team, and it may end up looking completely different than this. The main things that when you do go through this is whether it looks like the one on the left, one on the right, or something totally different, is that you create that sense of place. You build in that residential population. You get that really strong mix of land uses, office, residential, retail. So you create this vibrant, good place. At the end of the day, transit-oriented development is just good urban design that happens to be next to transit and makes that transit more functional. So with that, I think we're going to kind of start wrapping up. And
right, so just to kind of play on, and I realize we're kind of getting a little short on time, but hopefully everybody can stay for a few minutes past 2:30. On implementation, right, how do we get there? And I think Jordan started teeing up some of these pieces of starting to engage with the consultant to begin running these ideas a little bit more. And that's also going to have to run parallel to a very strong public engagement process. Both, that is talking to all your residents in the area and working very closely with the Superior Town Center developer. The leadership is really a component that is obviously the great mayor that is very engaged now, and RTD, CDOT. It'll require everybody to come together and look at the big longer-term advantage for the community overall. And then public-private partnership, right? This is going to have to be sources, right? I kind of think of it as a lasagna of funding. So you're going to have public funding, lots of public funding. You're going to have lots of private funding, and that's how that's going to, you're going to be able to do a deal like this, but not distinct from how you've already done. You know, you have TIF in place now. You use TIF. There's other mechanisms, funding mechanisms to use that bring public-private partnerships together. But specifically, you know, we have some recommendations that Jordan has really kind of tried to walk through. But I think these top three, I think, is kind of your mission, right? Or the place, the foundation that you start from every time, right? One is you preserve those existing revenue generators, and you want to protect them and keep them healthy. Two, you've got these incredible mountain views, and I think, you know, in thinking about turning that street grid to be able to shoot some views straight back at the Flatirons it is unprecedented, and you should definitely use that to your advantage. And third is so many people talked about how they drive during the week, but they never get in their car on the weekends because they just get on their bike and they go. And that's, for those of us who don't have that sounds fantastic and amazing. And you've got 2 sheets of ice, and you have this health center happening over there, and you just have there's just a feel of a healthy lifestyle. And again, while that kind of permeates throughout Colorado, I think you're starting to put some pieces in place that you should capitalize on that. And so having those 3 foundations to build on is tremendous, and kind of could guide every decision you make, right? I might add sustainability in here. You're tremendous about, you compost here in the town hall, and that not a lot of communities do that. So, and then, this is the phasing that Jordan talked about. Your first phase is this signage, getting with Brixmore and the landowner and really starting to think about, it's been 20 years, right? We need to think about new signage. We need to think about wayfinding. Let's think about, is there ways not just to, even in the short term, right? Not understood that this is auto-oriented, but it doesn't mean we can't encourage more pedestrians and bicycles into this area. And landscaping is the other thing, right? The big evergreens that completely block out some of the retail, those really need to be rethought. Phase 2 is really focusing on moving parcels around and getting RTD, right? You want to open up, if we're going to celebrate this transit station, you need to open it up and expose it. So you've got to be able to move the RTD parking, which means some kind of a land swap or some kind of deal with them to keep them whole and happy, right? They're going to require one-to-one replacement for parking. You're going to start, we've looked at creating a grid that stays within the boundaries of Marshall Road. So you can keep Marshall Road in place, but then begin creating a grid reaching out from the BRT. We thought that with Whole Foods, somebody mentioned it as that it's really one of the few community gathering places where people get together and have coffee and discourse, and that together with the vacant sports authority, that maybe you start to build some energy around health and fitness, and is it a climbing wall facility or yoga mantra, health and wellness area in that quadrant there. And then begin looking at housing products that start to emanate straight out from the BRT station that Matt mentioned. And then moving forward to the big move, right, which is what Jordan mentioned, is you've got to move Marshall. This is about moving infrastructure, resetting some groundwork on that, and then that's conversations with CDOT, obviously, and then setting a new alignment for the rest of the area. So with that, I think that is our presentation, and thank you for being patient through a very long presentation. And we're happy to entertain any questions. Yes?
How do you keep the big boxes and the sales tax generators vibrant and producing sales tax while a large portion of this would be undergoing major renovation?
Sure.
Structure?
Can you go back one, Eric? So I think what you want to do is try to contain it as much as possible. We kept this open, right? So this realignment of Marshall is the biggest issue, I think, that's going to be for the retail. And so there's ways of doing it, I think, with phasing it or with temporary solutions coming into building this so that they still have their access. I think this would be something to keep that available, to be open, right? To keep that open. So your access could come in here still and be whole, but it's really this section that you maybe can build this. Well, you keep this open, right? And then you construct this, have this under construction, but keep Marshall open during that construction and then flip it. Yes?
So a lot of the elements that I'm seeing in this is what we have going to town center. And so I'm wondering, how can we do it, or can it be done so they coexist rather than compete with each other?
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
Yeah, so that's a great, we were try to be very cognizant of that. I do think we are, and we interviewed the town center developer right there, and who was so excited, right, about this idea that this becomes this conversation between the two areas. And I think, one, when we're talking about a little bit different type of housing product, it begins setting a little bit different tone, right? When you talk about student housing or multifamily, and I think the type of housing that is at the, and correct me if I'm wrong, the housing that is identified for the town center is a little bit different. So you're starting to create some different markets that way. And you're also much more focused on transit here. So you're getting people who may not have a car because they don't need to have a car, but can bike, right? This is where Emily's talking about making sure you've got really strong connections from bike, from circulator, from pedestrian, from this area over to town center. But I think it's as you step through it, every step of the way, you want to make sure that you're complementing and supporting what's going over at the town center.
Well, and I think just to add, I mean, in reality, you're light years ahead on town center already. You're already building that out, and so that's going to be a leading development. I mean, in the short term, you could look at things like trying to introduce housing right at the station, but this would be coming after, on the heels of hopefully a very successful town center project. And when you think about placemaking, I mean, I always refer to PPS, which is the Project for Public Spaces. They're a great sort of placemaking nonprofit. And they talk about the power of 10. And so that's the idea of when you go somewhere, there's 10 things to do. But that can apply at a scale of a city, but also just a place. And so I think creating more vibrant places within Superior, places for people to go, only adds to the attractiveness of the community. And so there might be similar uses here, and you can play with the diversity of product types, building on the strengths and weaknesses of each site. But I think it's just the continual evolution of the town and its spaces over time. And with the town center coming in now, and this being a longer term sort of vision, it can kind of work on the heels of the success of the town. So.
We looked at the proximity of town center. It's only a half a mile. And so if we create a really nice pedestrian walk, we could do like an art walk or something like that. And the city's done a great job of already building. There's an underpass under McCaslin. So let's take advantage of that and let's build on that. And maybe we could do an art walk that connects the two developments. And then it creates a really great environment for somebody in the town center that can walk over to the transit station and hop on the BRT. So they don't have to necessarily live over here. So there can be two different, the town center and the marketplace can really be attractive to two different people when it comes to lifestyle.
I think the other piece from a retail perspective, you know, we're working off of a time frame of a snapshot of what the town center is proposed as today. We all know that is also a flexible piece that could change and evolve. Not saying they can't do it, but I think the retail component or the restaurant component is very different here than what will be over there. And the magnitude of what can be in this type of transit-oriented town center versus the sports-oriented town center over there is very different. I don't think the massing will be there. I think you have other components over there that we won't see here. The hotel base, the additional single-family and multifamily over there that we won't see over here. So I think they play together quite nicely. And that's not to say that doesn't change dramatically. And the next thing I know is they're announcing a grocery store over there. I doubt it, But given the current conditions, it doesn't appear to be that way. So that's, we just took a snapshot. So this, again, all of it's flexible, it all moves as the economy and changes within the site plans that we have.
This is a little aspirational. It's not necessarily the way development is thought of at this stage when it's getting built out. But at the end of the day, let's say, fast forward 50 years, town center is built, this is built, years, the names, they might change, they might go away. At the end of the day, they're neighborhoods of the same community. You're not visiting town center and then going up to the marketplace. You're going to Superior, you're living in Superior. And that the idea is that this is all, for either of them to really work together and to work in general, they have to be considered part of a greater whole. So that circulator piece is huge. Those street and bike connections are huge. And making sure that this is all this is Superior's downtown, right? All of it. I think that's the ultimate goal.
The office there, kind of is a block Target, it's a block Costco. How important is that? And this town has been told over and over again the whole corridor is saturated with office. Office doesn't work here. What do you think the future of office is?
Yeah, I actually think it's flying right over Superior right now. Like I said before, it's going from Boulder, it's either going to Interlochen, it's going to Denver right now. And I think if you build the right product, and what better visibility do you have than putting it? That's why we wanted to locate it in the area we did, is to give that visibility to 36. And we also talked about the whole idea of emphasizing the health aspect of what's going on here. And if you look at what's going on in Boulder, there's so many outdoor industry type companies, so many health oriented companies, that this could be a golden opportunity to latch onto that. But I think, is it saturated? It's saturated. There's a lot of movement in the market right now. But if you build the right product, that's where I think you can get those type of users to come in and really look at Superior. And I said I was a little worried about the amount of office that could go in over at the town center. We just talked, I think some of what happens there is going to dictate to say what happens here. So that's going to, I think, be the driver for how much office, whether it's all those areas we have identified there, could be more of those areas if it's successful. That's why we want to be flexible in how we look at those areas.
And one thing to think about too, though, with office is it's no longer just finding an attractive office location where people can drive up and park. Office users and businesses want to be near amenities and places that their employees will want to work and live in. And so putting just office at a pad site in the marketplace, I don't think is a viable thing to do. But once you start to create a place, that becomes more of an attractive location for that type of use.
And to address your visibility issue, I don't think Costco gets hurt at all. I think the one piece that could be considered, and I'm a signage pig, so I don't care. I'm going to say, you build a monument out here on 36 that lets people know what this project is about. We all had that vision, and I fought that battle with Aurora, with Littleton, with everybody out there, and everybody wanted a sign about the size of my pencil. And that's fine when you've got boxes that are 40 feet high and they're 150 feet wide. But given where Target is, and we're given where the majority of this project will be, and if you do the densification here, a lot of people lose some visibility. But there's also some energy that goes on with that. And if you can create the energy, a good example is what Jordan Perlmutter did with North Glen Mall when he redeveloped that. He turned everything inside. You can't really see what's in that project, but that project's very successful. And he put some big signage out on 25. You got to manage that so it doesn't get to be too busy. But they've done the same thing in Irvine. They've done the same thing in Bellevue. They've done the same thing around the country, and people are starting to look at what signage means. And you've got to give people a reason to get off.
I'm going to pile on that. With the transit station, right now we have a bunch of people at 7:30 in the morning getting on the bus and leaving. With the office here, people will also be getting off the bus and coming in.
That's the key, is trying to get more people to stay and live and work and shop here versus the 72% of you that get out in your cars and drive more than 20 minutes every morning.
All those people coming in, that's why Costco actually likes this kind of densification, the office and the residential, because it does bring more people there. On their way home from work, if they're driving here, they're going to stop at Costco before they head back to wherever they're heading.
All right, let's take another.
Yeah, I was going to speak to the competition questions from our standpoint. I think the biggest question is the timing on competition question.
this, at the end of the day, by the time you get all the property assembled together and everything, you're looking at minimum 5, probably closer to 10 years before we can start really planning that. So as long as the town center is full and active and there's no square feet of commercial over there and much of good retail, there's synergy.
Fine with it.
As soon as that happens,
It's good.
as soon as that happens, there's synergy with a new project like